In the sleepy coastal town of Windermere, the Sinclair mansion stood majestically, its Gothic towers rising above the meticulously manicured gardens that hid secrets as deep as the silence there. Elizabeth arrived at the mansion as the new nanny for the children of the enigmatic Lord Sinclair, whose presence was as imposing as it was mysterious. From the moment she stepped through the wrought iron gates, Elizabeth felt the weight of the secret-laden atmosphere that permeated the mansion. The servants received her with reverence, but also with respectful silence, as if they were afraid to reveal more than necessary about their master. The humble gardener, whose sun-kissed face hid a silent wisdom, became her companion in the early days, guiding her through the winding paths of the gardens he dedicatedly tended. Each encounter with the gardener was a mystery in itself. Her eyes, as deep as the lakes hidden in the distant mountains, watched her with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Elizabeth, free-spirited and bright-eyed, felt captivated by his serene presence and careful gestures as he intertwined the rose bushes. In the rare moments when they exchanged words, she captured nuances of an unknown past and a present full of unspoken meanings. Meanwhile, Lord Sinclair remained an unreachable mystery. His name echoed among the servants and locals with reverence, a figure whose presence was felt more than seen. Elizabeth longed to meet him in person, but he remained stubbornly distant, involved in unknown matters that left the mansion shrouded in a veil of suspense. Days turned into weeks, and Elizabeth fell into the routine of caring for the Sinclair children. The children, curious and vibrant as the sun setting over the sea, found her a friend and confidant. She taught them stories of far-off adventures and built sandcastles on the golden beaches that stretched beyond the mansion's gardens. However, her mind continued to wander to the gardener and Lord Sinclair, whose lives seemed intertwined in a complex web of secrets and duties. One summer afternoon, when the air was filled with the scent of flowers and the buzz of bees filled the air, Elizabeth found herself alone in the garden's maze of hedges. The gardener appeared silently around a path, his eyes meeting hers in a moment of almost sacred stillness. A shy smile curved his lips, revealing a tenderness that contrasted with the severity of his daily work. It was at that moment that Elizabeth realized how dependent she had become on the gardener's calm presence. He represented an anchor of peace amid the storm of mysteries that surrounded the mansion. His every gesture was loaded with meaning, every look a bridge to a world she was barely beginning to understand. However, while her heart went out to him, her mind couldn't avoid the shadows that hung over Lord Sinclair, like dark clouds gathering on the horizon. The months passed, and Elizabeth found herself increasingly entangled in the web of intrigue that surrounded the Sinclair household. Rumors whispered by servants by candlelight told of ancient family feuds and a lost love that haunted Lord Sinclair like a ghost from the past. The nights became witnesses to her lonely reflections as she watched the twinkling stars that dotted the night sky, wondering about the man whose heart seemed so far away and yet so close. Elizabeth, increasingly intrigued by the enigmatic Lord Sinclair and touched by the gardener's serenity, immersed herself in her new routine at the Sinclair mansion. The days began with the fresh aroma of breakfast prepared by the elderly cook and full of stories of times gone by. Elizabeth often found herself involved in the children's little pranks, such as attempts to hide vegetables in the nanny's pocket to avoid eating them. The gardener, in turn, revealed himself not only to be a master of plants, but also a patient listener to Elizabeth's stories of her adventures in the city and her readings of romances hidden beneath the flowers. In one such moment, Elizabeth found him silently laughing as he tried to persuade one of the rose bushes to give up its stubbornness and bloom before dinner. The nights were a mix of tranquility and mystery. Elizabeth often found herself sitting in the garden with the gardener, watching the stars that dotted the night sky. He shared subtle stories about life at the mansion and his love of plants, while Elizabeth told tales about her travels and the dreams she harbored for the future. One day, while the children were playing excitedly in the garden, a mischievous bird decided to nest in the cook's hair, causing a hilarious chase scene around the lawn. Elizabeth and the gardener watched the scene with knowing smiles, sharing a moment of lightness amidst the mysteries that surrounded them. Between the daily tasks of looking after the children and exploring the mansion's secret corners, Elizabeth discovered a library hidden behind a false wall in Lord Sinclair's study. Dusty old books, with stories going back centuries, proved a refuge for her restless imagination. The gardener, in turn, turned out to be an avid reader of romantic poetry, leaving Elizabeth intrigued by the sensitivity behind the austere facade. One night, during a storm raging furiously over Windermere, Elizabeth found herself alone with the gardener in the mansion's exotic plant greenhouse. The sound of rain hitting the glass roof created a symphony of sounds that echoed among the green leaves and colorful flowers. It was in this moment of peace and isolation that Elizabeth felt closest to the gardener, sharing childhood stories and dreams for the future while the world outside seemed to disappear. The weeks turned into months, and Elizabeth began to notice subtle changes in the dynamics of the mansion. The servants became more welcoming, sharing stories and superstitions about the house's previous owners. The gardener, with his enigmatic smile and sage advice about plants and life, became not just a companion but a silent confidant amid the whirlwind of emotions she faced. But behind the laughter and light-hearted moments, Elizabeth knew there were unsolved mysteries that hung over the mansion like fleeting shadows. Lord Sinclair remained distant, his world shrouded in secrets that she was barely beginning to glimpse. And while her heart longed to unravel these mysteries, she also feared the consequences of discovering the truth behind the impenetrable mask of the man who inhabited the Sinclair mansion. As the days passed at the Sinclair mansion, Elizabeth and the gardener found themselves closer and closer. Their conversations flowed naturally. However, no matter how much they tried to maintain a respectful distance, sparks of attraction began to emerge between them, transforming simple gestures into moments full of meaning. One serene afternoon, as they worked side by side in the garden, Elizabeth felt the gardener's closeness in a new and unsettling way. His fingers brushed accidentally while picking flowers for an arrangement, sending shivers of electricity across her skin. The gardener seemed to notice the same, his gaze meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "Forgive me," he murmured, his husky voice filled with unrevealed emotion. "I did not mean that." Elizabeth tried to hide the turbulence of her emotions with a shaky smile. "Don't worry. It was an accident." However, that brief touch had awakened something inside her that she could no longer ignore. Each subsequent encounter with the gardener brought with it a silent tension, a desire they both tried to keep buried beneath the responsibilities of life at the mansion. One sunny morning, when the gardener was busy pruning the rose bushes, Elizabeth found herself lost in thought as she strolled through the hedge maze. Without realizing it, she ended up coming across a scene that made her blush to the roots of her hair, the gardener, shirtless, showing firm muscles and sweat glistening under the golden sun. "Oh, I'm sorry," she exclaimed, turning around abruptly. The gardener, surprised by Elizabeth's sudden appearance, hurriedly grabbed a nearby shirt and quickly put it on. His eyes met hers, a mix of embarrassment and humor dancing in her expression. "There's no need to apologize, Miss Elizabeth," he replied, trying to regain his composure. "I was just doing my job." Elizabeth felt even more embarrassed by the unexpected encounter, but also unable to get the image of the shirtless gardener out of her mind. That moment revealed to her a side of the man behind the humble gardener, awakening a desire that she barely knew how to deal with. At night, when the garden was plunged into gentle darkness and the scent of the flowers intensified, Elizabeth found herself alone with the gardener once more. This time, however, there were no words between them, just the soft sound of leaves rustling in the wind and the warmth of their shared closeness. At night, when the garden was plunged into gentle darkness and the scent of the flowers intensified, Elizabeth found herself alone with the gardener once more. This time, however, there were no words between them, just the soft sound of leaves rustling in the wind and the warmth of their shared closeness. As they walked side by side along the garden's winding paths, the tension between them was palpable. The gardener stopped suddenly, looking deeply into Elizabeth's eyes, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. He raised a hand hesitantly before gently touching her face, as if he feared she would disappear. "Elizabeth," he began, his voice low and hoarse with emotion, but the words hung in the air, unspoken.